All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. I got the evening right this time. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest today is doing phenomenal journalism. He's the co editor of the Grayzone. Everyone, please give a huge welcome to Max Blumenthal. Welcome, Max.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina.
Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the invite. Good to be here with your audience.
Cool. So, before we get started, Max, why don't you tell everyone, like, why did you decide to get into independent journalism and how did you get started at the Grayzone?
That's a yeah. There's there's hardly any short answer to that, but I can tell you it was the right move because there was really no place for me in non-independent journalism. There's really very few places to not follow a pretty much a US government line within mainstream media right now. And you can see it clearly just in the way that the media is reacting to Biden withdrawing troops from Afghanistan after 20 years. They are essentially a voice of the Pentagon. And it's been that way pretty much my whole life. I mean, I come from, a family where journalism and politics was everywhere, but I actually hadn't intended originally on a career in journalism. And it was really the post 9/11 era, Bush's war on terror, and then Bush's alliance with the Christian right, and the way that the media was embracing George W. Bush, that he was beloved. Not only it was, a situation that would be familiar to people right now who are upset about the bipartisan consensus, that the media was just embracing Bush after 9/11, but also the Democrats were. And I knew that this was an extremely dangerous president, that the war on terror was going to be a disaster. And so I started out then, and that was when blogging was becoming a thing. I mean, the internet really was online journalism was very marginal before the post 9/11 era. And so I was one of the original kind of blogspot bloggers. I was writing for salon.com when it was like a very widely read publication, and you could actually be anti-war and anti-imperialist and have a wide audience there. And I just started picking up the phone, doing cold calls, doing shoe leather journalism. I was funding my journalism career by living very cheaply and working as a substitute teacher, delivering food, whatever I had to do part time. And then I'd spend the rest of the 3 or 4 days of the week I had doing journalism. And, eventually it became a career. And the Grayzone was the result of the complete collapse of progressive media in the Trump era, when we saw publications like Alternet, Salon.com, The Nation take on Russiagate and just take on the new Cold War. Essentially, it was like the war on terror for Democrats. It was disgusting. And they all collapsed for different reasons that I don't really want to get into, but you can just look at the what happened to all of the flagship progressive media sites that were taking on George W. Bush in the post 9/11 era, and how they all collapsed or fell under the control of establishment Democrats. And the Grayzone was really something I created because I had nowhere else to go. And it took off. We just filled a void. We found that people were with us, they were supporting us. And now we have, Ben Norton, Aaron Mate, Anya Parampil, and a whole bunch of contributors. And I feel like other sites have flourished as well, who are doing the anti-imperialist journalism we're doing, and we've kind of helped anchor a new media ecosystem. And then we see with you and with Nick and so many other podcasters. I can name so many of them. I'm familiar with you through him because you were in his comment section, and then I started checking out your work. That we are a force to be reckoned with right now. I think probably the loudest voice, left-wing voice that's really resisting the kind of bipartisan consensus is Jimmy Dore, and he's sort of another anchor. He's given us a big platform at the Grayzone, but wherever we can find a legitimate platform, we're just going to get in where we can fit in, and whatever we say resonates with people because they see that we're living in a declining empire. and both parties they both have skin in the imperial game.
Yeah, my dad was in the military, and so I have always been anti-war because my dad told me about stories, things that he experienced, what he saw like as a soldier, and I also saw the effect of war on soldiers when they returned home and the effects that it had on children. So I've always been anti-imperialist. I want to get into what's going on in Afghanistan because it boggles my mind how people are cheering, saying that, oh, Joe Biden he's getting rid of the war in Afghanistan. And I'm gonna share my screen to show you this for just a second. This was something I tweeted recently because it just really bothered me. And I said that all those people that said Biden's doing a great job, we're leaving Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in Kabul, stop believing Joe Biden. And this is the picture here. Afghan family is massacred in U.S. drone strike in Kabul. 9 people killed, including 6 children. And I want to get your opinion on this because we have a lot of people, a lot of commentators saying that Joe Biden's doing a great job and that he's getting us out of Afghanistan. And it's like they're completely ignoring the fact that they're still doing airstrikes. They're still killing innocent people. I want to get your take on that.
Well, they'll continue doing things like this, but this airstrike was particularly egregious. And we need to look at the situation not just as Joe Biden calling all the shots, just as Donald Trump didn't call the shots. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump wanted to end George W. Bush and Barack Obama's war in Afghanistan. Bush started it, Obama escalated it. He let the generals run rampant. His Pentagon and the civilians in it lied to the American public. They knew it was a failed war. And it's really Obama and Bush who we need to blame and criminally prosecute. Donald Trump came in knowing that the war had to end, and he was rolled by the military at every step of the way. The Pentagon is probably the most powerful institution in our society, arguably more powerful than U.S. intelligence, and it's part of the same apparatus. And I can give examples of how Trump was rolled every step of the way. Biden comes in having seen what took place under the Obama administration, how the generals lied to Obama, how Obama fell for it, how people in Obama's Pentagon tricked him, like Michelle Flournoy, for example, who he kept out of the Pentagon. He did not appoint her as defense secretary. Biden believes that his son, Beau, his smart son, not like the crazy, stupid fail son, Hunter, who he's left with, died as a result of going to Iraq and dying in the burn pits. There are these bases in Iraq where artillery, spare parts, all kinds of chemicals were basically being burned outside, and the soldiers were inhaling all of the fumes, and they came back with just disproportionate rates of cancer, similar to Agent Orange after Vietnam. His son died of brain cancer. He connects his son Beau's death to the burn pits in Iraq. And Joe Biden, remember, he whipped the vote for the war in Iraq. He was one of the loudest Democratic voices, along with Hillary Clinton, supporting Bush's war in Iraq. So he holds himself personally responsible for his son's death. He is a tortured person who, as we see, is mentally just kind of hanging on to consciousness. And this is his last cause, is trying to get out of Afghanistan. It's the first time we've seen a US president actually resist the Pentagon this strongly. And I really encourage everyone to watch Biden's speech today. He actually cited the Brown Cost of War project, which found that the US has spent $4 trillion on these failed wars in the Middle East. He cited the rate of suicides by soldiers every day, something like 18 a day. And he said that the 1% of our population who is paying the cost of these wars, the service members and veterans, need to stop being forced to sacrifice so the rest of the society can enjoy a false sense of safety for wars that only make the US more unsafe. And these are the things that Barack Obama should have come in and said. It's what Barack Obama promised he would come in and say before Obama betrayed all of his campaign promises. And of course, Biden's betrayed almost every other promise, but here he is attempting to do something. So he gets all the he gets all the Afghan collaborators. They're not just interpreters. They're people who are in death squads. Who the hell knows what they were doing? But their lives are in peril because they worked with the U.S. occupation, and they go. They get him to the Kabul airport. In the middle of Kabul, there's pretty much no way to secure the airport, and they're sitting ducks for ISIS-K. Who knows who controls ISIS-K? It could be elements of the deposed Afghan government that want to keep U.S. troops bogged down there. And everyone knows there's going to be bombings. It takes place. U.S. troops start shooting everywhere, as they do after so many bombings. That's just kind of what happens. After roadside bombings, they just shoot wildly everywhere, and they start killing civilians. So they wind up killing some of the people they're supposed to evacuate. It's a complete disaster, a bloodbath. And then the Pentagon says, we need to do a retaliatory airstrike, and Biden does it for political expediency because he has to vow revenge on ISIS, and they kill a family. It's a disgusting situation. Any U.S. president who would try to leave Afghanistan at this point would face a similar situation. And we have to consider what happened to JFK, John F. Kennedy, when he tried to prevent all the escalations in Vietnam, and then wound up agreeing to half of them, when he took on the Joint Chiefs over the Cuban Missile Crisis, when he kind of half-heartedly challenged the entire apparatus of the Cold War in one of his final speeches at American University. Well, he lost his head, literally. So we're not just dealing with Joe Biden here. We're dealing with what Donald Trump called the deep state. We're dealing with the military intelligence apparatus, a national security state that is firmly entrenched and which essentially controls U.S. government. And what Biden is going to do here is, in his mind, he'll get to achieve something for himself psychologically. He will achieve something for a lot of the families who sacrificed in Afghanistan and whose sons and daughters died in vain for the most pointless criminal war of the recent era. And then U.S. troops will be repositioned to fight China in the pivot for Asia. And by that point, I think Biden will be sort of personally a spent force. But we can't just completely trash him without acknowledging where the real power lies. And I hate to say that, because I don't hate to say it, but I have to say it in spite of the fact that I cannot stand what Biden has done throughout his career. I think he is one of the most toxic politicians who served in the Senate.
Agreed. I want to share something with you that Unapologetic posted recently. He's also a leftist commentator, and he focuses a lot on foreign policy. And I saw this earlier today. And he said that when Biden says he's ending the Afghan war, he means he's removing the risk of U.S. troops being killed in military ops. We will continue to fight terrorism in Afghan. He'll continue doing airstrikes like the one that killed civilians this week. The genocide of Afghans won't stop. And I want to get your opinion on that. Do you feel that this is an actual genocide that's happening here?
I don't know if I can address the question of genocide, but the underlying premise of that comment is correct. We republished a piece by Jeremy Kuzmarov at Covert Action Quarterly. We republished it at the Grayzone about the coming hybrid war in Afghanistan. The U.S. doesn't wage war like with tanks and conventional forces anymore. There's no need for like the A-10 Warthog tank hunter. There is no need for the Crusader artillery system. I really question the need for the Abrams tank and the Bradley fighting vehicle. All of these pieces can probably be put to rest. And the only reason the U.S. Navy exists is because the U.S. is essentially inciting a new Cold War and brinksmanship with China. So what the true face of U.S. war right now is what we would call hybrid war. It can destroy entire countries through economic warfare. It can destroy them or do damage to them through proxy warfare, as we saw in Syria, or the multi-billion-dollar arm and equip program to Salafi jihadist militias. That's how the U.S. initially destroyed Afghanistan during Operation Cyclone in the 1980s. That's what the CIA did. And then we have the whole drone program, the kinetic warfare, which was what Obama brought into force. Drone strikes and special forces being dropped in and out of countries anywhere in the world, a global war. When John Kerry ran for president against George W. Bush, he said, we need a smarter, more sensitive way of waging war. And then Dick Cheney was always attacking him, Mr. Halliburton, for saying more sensitive. But what Kerry meant was just drone warfare and special ops. And so we will see a return to that with Afghanistan, as well as the economic war that's already begun on the Taliban government, where the U.S. has frozen $8.5 billion of assets that belong to the Afghan government. And it will only cause more poverty and suffering in that country. And then there's the pivot to Asia, which is the most dangerous civilizational threat I think the world faces right now, is a war between the U.S. and China.
That's a good point. BetBeat Media said, weird thing is that also in Europe, the mainstream media supports the US wars. It's an international psychosis. Do you feel that the mainstream media has an obligation to do the right thing when it comes to discussing these wars and discussing what's really going on? Or do you feel that that's the president's responsibility to tell people the truth?
Well, the mainstream media in Europe is part of the same media we face here, and it's controlled by the same forces, the same corporate forces, the same state forces. I mean, if you look at the BBC or Deutsche Welle, these are information warfare weapons that are actually projected abroad and work closely with the foreign ministry of those states. So Europe its sovereignty has been sacrificed by the EU, and that media is essentially the megaphone of the bankers cartel that we know of as the EU. And Europe is chomping at the bit right now for more independence and more sovereignty. A perfect example is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which will provide cheap liquefied natural gas to Germany from Russia and is a major threat to the project that NATO wants to bring into force in Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine is the base of U.S. hostile new Cold War operations against Russia. Germany resisted the U.S. every step of the way there. They basically, Heiko Maas, their foreign minister, told Biden, there is no way we are sacrificing this because we can't afford to ship natural gas over here across the Atlantic. It's really expensive. And, Russia's right there. It's our neighbor. We've actually always had relations with them. We're going to do this. And the Biden administration had to climb down and announce they weren't going to sanction it anymore. So they're trying all these tricks to stop that. And meanwhile, the Biden administration is punishing Europe for, Macron in France is trying to establish an all-European army that's sort of peripheral or separate from NATO. And the Biden administration is punishing Europe right now by telling Europeans who are fully vaccinated that they cannot travel to the US. They've got like a travel ban on Europeans, and it's making Biden extremely unpopular inside the EU. Europeans don't understand why they can't come to the US. Many of them have to quarantine in Mexico for like at least 14 days. It costs them thousands of dollars to visit their families here. And they think that Biden is punishing Europe and trying to twist the arms of their government so they're less independent. So the US is, it's a ball and chain around the ankles of Europeans as well, not just Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East.
I want to give a shout out to Super Chat. This isn't Jimmy Dore Max. This is a different Jimmy Dore, but he said,
I didn't know there was one.
He said, will the squad demand the $300 million a day we spent on Afghanistan to now be spent back here at home? I want to get your opinion about the squad and how great they've been in all of this. I want to get your opinion about that. Do you feel like they haven't been demanding enough? I know you were at the Capitol like during the protests like recently. What has been your experience talking to them, and do you feel like there's more that they can do?
Well, they have no real power. Their power is rhetorical, and AOC's power is as a celebrity who transcends politics. She's sort of like an Obama figure who will never obtain the power that Obama actually had, which he never used. But they've spoken out about the cost of the Afghan war. Ilhan Omar has, Cori Bush has spoken out against the war state. She's connected the black struggle in the U.S. to the Palestinian struggle. They make these statements, but what they fail to do is actually use their vote when the chips are down and the margins between the votes of the Democrats and Republicans are so close to actually twist the arm of Democratic leadership and extract concessions on the key issue of empire. I mean, we see they didn't do it on forcing the vote on Medicare for all. They didn't actually do it on the eviction crisis, but on issues of empire, that's like something that they have produced. They've done nothing on. So like when there was an assault on Gaza, Thomas Massie, who is a Republican libertarian from Kentucky, said, cancel all U.S. aid abroad. And I was like, that's the more principled position than Israel is an apartheid state, pass it on. Because most U.S. aid abroad goes to Israel and Egypt. And it goes to Egypt to pay for its military to prevent Egyptians from having what they want, which is an actual war to liberate Palestine. Basically, the U.S. just owns Egypt through the Camp David Agreement and all the aid it provides them. The U.S. provides more aid to Israel than it provides to all of Africa every decade in 1 year. And then the aid to Africa is just like soft power. It doesn't actually change people's situation. In many ways, it binds them to the neoliberal reality that keeps them in poverty. So Thomas Massie's position, I thought, was much more principled than theirs. And then I see all these contradictions. Jamal Bowman, he defeated Elliot Engel. Elliot Engel was the worst Zionist member of Congress. His name was on every pro-war and pro-sanctions resolution passed by Congress as a co-sponsor. So it's great that he got taken out. It was, the people of the district spoke, and Jamal Bowman rises to the surface. And at the Capitol, you saw him with a big Wakanda Forever shirt that was the W shaped like a Wu-Tang logo. And he was talking about, we stand against colonialism and we stand against white supremacy. But a few weeks before, I remembered he took this gratuitous shot at Cynthia McKinney, someone who has not been in the Democratic Party for 2 decades, is a totally marginal figure. I think she's affiliated with the Green Party, and called her out for anti-Semitism because she said something about 9/11 in Israel. And it's like he's still signaling to the Democratic Party leadership that he's one of the good ones and participating in a lot of anti-China legislation, claiming he's not against colonialism if he's participating in the attempt to recolonize East Asia. So, there are a lot of contradictions there, and their rhetoric can only go so far. And of course, we haven't even talked about the eviction moratorium.
Absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Cheese Sandwich in the super chat. Said, in a recent video, Tulsi Gabbard said the U.S. has been ignoring the threat of radical Islamic terrorist groups. What might she be talking about?
I mean, her comments were not as on point as I would have liked, because she was warning that like Al-Qaeda was coming to take over and that Islamic extremism was coming for us. It's like the kind of lunacy that we would hear from the far right during the Bush era and the Obama era. There's no threat of Islamic extremism taking over the US. It has no influence here. What she has done, though, is point out the fact that the US armed and trained jihadist militias in Syria. And I defended her and supported her for that. I wrote about it in my book, The Management of Savagery, how I went to Tulsi Gabbard press conference and was one of the few reporters there where she had introduced a resolution to stop funding Al-Qaeda, stop arming Al-Qaeda. The group responsible for 9/11, she only got 12 co-sponsors. Only one member of Congress was willing to appear at her press conference, and she was demonized because she touched the third rail, which is the CIA. And it just shows how sick our national security state is. It shouldn't even be called a national security state because, I mean, look at what they did. Look at what they did. They put the most vicious, murderous, one of the most vicious, murderous organizations in the world on steroids And now it's showing up in Afghanistan.
Yep.
And she was driven out of the Democratic Party and driven out of politics for that. So here she is, and she's kind of like dabbling in the right. She's in this kind of strange political ecosystem that I don't totally understand where she's gonna land. I mean, everything seems upside down right now. There's all of these political alignments taking place. But if she would just stick with that position that she took while she was in Congress and keep reinforcing that point about the dangers of proxy warfare, I think she'd be on solid ground.
Good points. I want to get into the no-fly bill, because this was something that you pointed out recently on Twitter with Richie Torres. And I just want to share my screen really quick with this, because I get the point that they're trying to make, but I just worry that this has us heading down a difficult path here. It says Congressman files bill to make vaccines mandatory for commercial flight. HR 4980, offered by Democrat Rep. Richie Torres of New York, directs the Secretary of Homeland Security to ensure that any individual traveling on a flight that departs from or arrives to an airport inside the United States or a territory of the United States is fully vaccinated against COVID-19. I have a couple of questions about this, but first, I want to get your opinion about it. Do you think this is a good idea? And yes, or why not?
Well, can I ask, are we on YouTube or just Patreon?
We're on YouTube and Rockfin.
Okay, because you really can't. Anytime I talk about this issue on YouTube, we get flagged as in violation of community standards. YouTube censors any discussion of COVID, so I don't want to put you in a position where you get a strike on your channel.
Okay.
So if you green light what I want to say, then I can say it. But YouTube is it's hard censorship of this issue. Even if you speak out and say what Anthony Fauci is saying, you could get censored because it's all algorithmic.
I try to use words like the jab.
Okay, the jab.
Yeah, I try to use words like that.
I'll try, but I just want to ask your enthusiastic consent to talk about this because, at the Grayzone, we can't, except on Rockfin.
Good point. Would you say yes or no? Like, do you think this is a good idea? Like, yes or no?
I mean, it is a disaster in waiting. It's a disaster already unfolding. And, you can check my Twitter account to see what I think about it. People are, insulting me with familiar terms to try to shut me down on this issue. But I see where we're going. We already live in a caste system. We already live in an oligarchy. We already live and our caste system is reinforced by white supremacy. And this is a bill that would further reinforce that caste system, take millions of people who are already marginalized and prevent them from traveling for not taking a jab that does not prevent viral transmission. I mean, Anthony Fauci admitted that. The CDC director admitted that. When you take the jab, it's for protecting yourself, just like pretty much any jab. But this is this is different than smallpox or polio. It's not an airborne it's an airborne respiratory virus. It's not a static virus. So you're actually not threatening anyone, whether you took it or not, when you go on a plane. It's about your own choice. And so it makes no medical sense. It's deeply unethical. And we just saw 90 school bus drivers in Chicago, forced off the job. These are working class people, mostly people of color, because they wouldn't abide by the mandate. And that means that the school children, who are mostly of color in public schools, have no one to transport them to school. And the city is paying out something like $1,000 per student so that they can get to school on their own. And this is, if you look at what's happening on the South Side, a lot of youth get targeted on their way to school if they're going through areas where, that it's hostile territory. That's why what Rahm Emanuel did when he shut down all these schools and move children to other schools was so disastrous, and it actually cost lives. So they're costing more lives, and it makes no medical sense. It's just to satisfy the hysteria of everyone who's been taken in by the media's fear porn. And we're just seeing the beginning of the assault on the working class here, and we're just seeing the beginning of the anger that's going to pour out unless it stops.
Yeah, I agree. I work in education, and the students came back this week, and it's been a nightmare. I've talked about it. I started talking about it Monday, like on my channel. I was like, "Oh my God, get me out of here!" Like, this is crazy. They did not plan this out like well at all. Just a disaster. I know you have a hard stop at 7:45. I do want to get your opinion about the eviction moratorium. I am deeply concerned. I just know so many people that are just not going to have anywhere to go. Like, even here in Boston, we don't have enough homeless shelters to house all of those people that are about to be evicted. And Nico brought up something recently today that actually makes a lot of sense. He said, even if the landlords do evict everyone, how is that going to put more money into the landlord's pockets? I mean, they're still going to be without money. And I feel like the squad, I feel like Joe Biden, I feel like Nancy Pelosi, they have not fought for this. They're not doing the things that they can do to protect people who are about to lose their homes. And I just feel like I'm going through 2008 all over again, because I remember people losing their homes during the housing crisis. Like, how is this happening like twice in my life? I want to get your opinion about that.
Well, we need to ask why these people are on the brink of eviction as well. It seems to be because of the lockdown that was said to have been implemented to flatten the curve, but the curve was never flattened. So what was the point? Was it worth it? Was the cost in human suffering? We see child diabetes is now up massively. Record opioid deaths up. Opioid deaths up 50% in West Virginia, 30% nationally. Economic damage, like the kind that on the scale we witnessed in the U.S. in 2020, causes excess deaths. University of Bristol study in the UK theorized that 510,000 excess deaths could be caused in that country alone by their lockdown policy. So we need to really put this in perspective and question whether we should go there again when these are the working class and poor that are paying the price. And of course, what the squad did was provide cover for Democratic Party leadership to not do what it needed to do, which was to take a vote, force everyone to come back there. And what the squad's job should have been was mobilize people in a mass movement at the Capitol and not abandon the steps as soon as they got a temporary and conditional CDC moratorium, which was always going to be overturned by Brett Kavanaugh and the right-wing Republican robots who are essentially controlled by remote control by industry and the big developers. It was always going to be overturned. So ultimately, all they did was buy a few days. So what else could have been done? What else could have been done? I mean, the Biden administration could have just told the Supreme Court to go fuck itself. I mean, that's what they could have done. They could have been like, well, we just don't agree, and we're just going to keep fighting you and kicking the can down the road. Cities are actually paying landlords right now in many cases. So, evictions in Democrat-controlled cities, they might not be as extreme. Those are constituents of a lot of the Democratic leadership. So we have a system right now where landlords are just getting paid by municipal authorities, and the stimulus money was paying them before. I mean, what was the stimulus money? All it was it went through the population into the hands of the credit card companies and the rentier class. It's a lot like Afghanistan, where it was just a way of washing money for the elites, basically sending it to contractors, getting the money out of the pockets of the U.S. public and putting it in the hands of contractors and creating wealth within the upper middle class and upper class. That's what the war is about. And they couldn't have done it without a war. So the whole economy is structured in a completely, to use a Yiddish term, fakakta way. And the squad should be talking about that more But also, I mean, now it's about resisting the evictions themselves, like getting out in the streets and getting in the way physically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about what could have happened if they would have planned this further in advance and told everyone, tweeted about it and told everybody, "Hey, we are going to protest at the Capitol about the eviction moratorium." I would have found a way to be in DC. Like I feel like people would have found
Oh
a way to
yeah,
be
that's a
there.
great point. I asked Cori Bush, why didn't you all say anything? Why was it a last second thing? And she said, well, we have been sending letters and we have been trying to do stuff to prevent this. And then when we found out that Congress was going to recess without ruling on it, then we ran down the halls and we decided to get there and do something. So um, then, they said their strategy was to not play nice. AOC said, we're not going to play nice anymore. We're going to get in their faces and we're going to make them all come back and put their votes down, put their names down and shame everyone who supports the evictions. Then Chuck Schumer and Adam Schiff show up, and then they change their tune and they say, well, we just want this CDC moratorium. And then they left. So yeah, and no one could get. I was trying to get people down there on like the fourth or fifth day. You saw some members of socialist parties coming down. I could. They weren't really prepared, so they didn't have their own messaging. But what the good thing, what I can say that Cori Bush did do was she did give those of us who are not captured by the Democratic Party an opportunity, if we could have gotten down there in large masses, to actually overtake the messaging of the squad and to start introducing our own message and our own plan, but that never happened. And the people that were on the steps, it was like 60-70% their fans and their staff. So that's
Oh my
the
gosh. Robert Escobar show, thanks for the super chat. He said, what should people facing eviction do right now? How do they hit back? Like organizing strikes on Black Friday or hitting them where it hurts ideas? I'll tell you, my tip really quick is Black Friday is a good one. I don't shop on Black Friday anyway. It's a disaster. People are crazy out there during Black Friday. But the other one is there is a general strike coming up October 15th. Don't forget about that. But you can start right now, like not buying goods from corporations. You can start doing that right now. You don't have to wait till October 15th. You're gonna have to protest. I mean, it's hard because like if you get evicted and you choose not to leave, then the police can come and they can forcibly remove you. What's your take on that, Max?
I think there needs to be organization. Well, first of all, I work in the media, so I had my DMs filled up during the eviction um, sit-in at the Capitol with reporters, independent reporters, asking if I know about any evictions taking place that they can cover so they can make this a bigger issue. And I think Black Friday is a good idea because when you get those crowds there, you get cameras there from local media. People being evicted could show up and not only strike, but protest. You got to get on camera. The media doesn't want to report on this. What the corporate media never does is go out and report on inequality by going to people's homes and going to their communities and showing the cost of the policies that are being cooked up in Congress on regular people. They prefer to cover like, you know, zillions of people dying from COVID or like Marines holding babies at the Kabul airport. They're basically running an information war against us, and it has to be interrupted by people who are facing the effects of capitalism. And the only way to do that is to get organized and get to media. And right now, like there's a lot of confusion on when the evictions take place. When I've seen them in the area I live, which is like a community of like working class, mostly working and working poor people in Southeast DC. It just happens like really fast, and then the people are gone, and you just see all their belongings out on the street, and it's too fast for anyone to get there. Um, so, just as from the perspective of someone in the media, like those of us in independent media, we have a responsibility to cover it if we can. And housing as an issue is undercovered, period. It's one of the most important issues to everyone. The American public is being sanctioned right now by their own government. And if we can get the word out on social media, at least, and get cameras there and start making a bigger issue out of this, that's the best we can do. I can only speak for myself and what I can do.
Well said. All right, Max, I know you got to jet in like 2 minutes. Is there anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, and where can people find you?
Well, yeah, you can find me at thegrayzone.com and Max Blumenthal on Twitter. And, I'll hope to come back on the Sabby Sabs live stream. And I have my own Rockfin live stream now called Foreign Agents. Also check out Moderate Rebels, my official YouTube podcast where we fit in with the censorship guidelines of YouTube with Ben Norton. And yeah, there's always more to say. But I guess the last thing I want to say is Julian Assange is still in prison and he's not allowed to address the media.
Yep. Well said. Max, thanks so much for coming on. Guys, I think Nick's going to jump at Socialist MMA. I'm sorry, I forget some people don't know him as Nick, is going to jump on for a couple of minutes. But Max, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Great. See you again.
Bye. All right, guys, let me send Nick the link really quick. So hold on just a second, because I know Nick is probably like, you didn't send me the link. You didn't send it to me. Nick, I'm going to send you the link in Twitter DM if you can hear me. I think you can. That was awesome. Like, I really enjoyed talking to Max about that. He's very knowledgeable about these things. It's always good to talk to people that are on the ground and that are, have the opportunity to speak to the people. I just think that is so important. Let me get my link here. Just a second. Let me close that. All right, Nick, you're going to have to do something that I know you're not a fan of doing. You're going to have to check your DMs. I'm about to send this to you now. Let me go to Oh God, I ventured into message requests. That one's a woof. All right, send this. Yeah, but definitely like a great conversation, you guys. Let me tell Nick I just sent it to him. Yeah, definitely a great conversation. Like I said, it's really important that you talk to people that are on the ground. That is eventually something that those of us at FHL, we really want to do. We eventually want to get on the ground. Like once we get like the equipment and all that stuff, that's the plan. Sent link to your Twitter DM. Okay. All right. While we're waiting on Nick, I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Oh, never mind. Nick's here. He's so fast. I swear to God. Like, how are you that fast?
That just show how hype I am to talk to my sister Sabby. Especially after that interview, especially after the conversation we had with Max. As soon as I saw that in the preview, I'm like, I definitely gotta check that out live. Especially with the crazy stuff that's going on right now. Always good to jump on. Got a show a little bit later tonight, but I was not realizing like, I got time. Like once I backed it, I got time to talk to Sabby for a little bit. So what is up?
I have to mention East Coast time because I forget. I told you us East Coasters, we think everybody is on the same coast.
I live in a flyover state, so most of the time I had to deal with either West Coast or East Coast people. So I figured, like, all right, I think she meant Eastern time. I'm down to jump on stream, talk some shit a little bit.
All right, thanks so much, James, for the super sticker. Yeah, so Nick, I want to get your opinion about the whole, Biden thing with Afghanistan too, because I feel like the past couple of days I just keep seeing people praise him, like leftists praising him, saying like, oh my God, he's doing such a great job, best president ever. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, I don't understand why any anti-imperialist will be praising Biden right now. And I don't understand this urge that people have to praise politicians where they feel the need that we have to praise politicians. They say, oh, if we don't praise politicians if they do their job, they'd be less likely are less inclined to do their job in the first place. Now let's think about that. This is completely ahistorical. This doesn't make sense. So when they do good stuff, they count that as them getting political capital. So then they can continue to do worse stuff. And we've seen Joe Biden continue to do that with Afghanistan. So I was raising the flag on this when they were continuing to increase the military budget. So I'm like, okay, if you get out of Afghanistan, we know that the Afghanistan war costs $300 million a day. $300 million a day, a latest study said the Afghanistan war costs. So if you are getting out of that expensive war, why are you increasing the military budget? So when I saw that, I'm not going to praise Joe Biden because, and then the funny thing is they actually said it. They was open. Jen Psaki said it at one of her press conferences where they're like, yeah, the reasons why we need to get out of Afghanistan because we need to start investing more of our resources into fighting Russia, China. Apparently they meant bombing Africa as well. So it's like I don't understand why anyone who actually anti-imperialist don't understand that. And there's a difference between being anti-war and anti-imperialist. You can be all the above, but the people who are just anti-war, like, oh yeah, we out of Afghanistan. But if you're anti-imperialist, you know that we are still continuing covert operations in Afghanistan. That's why Biden bombed and killed 6 kids. Now that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But my mindset is that we are out of a country, we're completely out. Now we will see what the Biden administration will continue to do, but as it is right now, they already signaled that they are going to continue possibly looking for terrorist threats in Afghanistan. That what Unapologetic was talk. I know you mentioned him a little earlier, but this is kind of what he was mentioning as well. This is what the Biden administration said it was going to do. We're not going to give up the fight against terrorism in Afghanistan. What that means? So I mean, are you still invested into that? Because that's not something anti-imperialists should be praising, right?
Imagine if he took all of that energy and tried to fight for people right here in America.
The funny thing is, when you listen to his speech, and Max Blumenthal was talking about this earlier, he, in order to justify, because he getting crucified by the mainstream media, that's crazy. I'm gonna do a show with him later today. So he gonna justify. He gotta have to justify why he pulled out the war. But if you actually listen to his justification why he pulled out Afghanistan, that applies to all your conflicts, brother. And right now, I don't understand why anyone would praise him or a party that's not giving us a $15 minimum wage, not giving us health care, and not canceling student loan debt. What they rather do, they would rather fight a cold war against China and Russia right now. They rather bomb Africa. They rather continue to bankroll genocides in Palestine as well. And they backing multiple horrific neoliberal regimes like the regime in Colombia. A lot of people don't talk about that, but the Biden administration is actually close allies with Ivan Duque, and they have shown support in their government stamping down the protests in Colombia. So these people do not have the best interest of I was about to say non-Americans, but actually I'll just say non-white privileged Americans, because not like they care about black people here in America either. That's why they spend all these resources fighting overseas instead of taking care of our people in our own country. And that's what it means to be anti-imperialist. If they're not reducing the amount of resources and our money that we're paying them in terms of Afghanistan war, there's nothing to praise there, because they're just shifting that resources and moving it to other adventures, which once again, non-conspiracy, they said this and they was open about it. And the neoliberals were cheering about this. Like, yeah, we need a smarter offensive game plan for United States empire domination. So that's what it is.
Yeah, Robert Hutchings said Biden doesn't care because he knows he's a one-term president. Ooh.
So now they definitely. I'm just like Kareem know what time we're doing today. We'll be on Friday after Olympics, but yeah, it's also pretty funny because their numbers continue to go down. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and now Joe Biden is now officially underwater for the first time in his presidency. And I was going to report on this. I guess we can talk about it now. We can do a little preview on that, because now I was kind of flagging this before, how a lot of people's Trump derangement syndrome is starting to wear off. Yep. And Trump derangement syndrome is the idea, just to 100% explain what I mean. Trump derangement syndrome is the idea that somehow Donald Trump is inherently inferior, or has the moral, or that the Democratic Party has the moral high ground over Donald Trump. Now, everyone who knew the background of Joe Biden, like we was raising this issue at Friday the Leftist, and I was on my individual YouTube channel as well. If you looked at Joe Biden resume and what he continued to advocate for, there's no one that's a bigger threat to Black and brown communities. Yeah, Donald Trump is a unique threat as well, but Biden is continuing that. Biden is continuing to fund ICE more. He continued the genocide in Palestine. He continued all of Trump's foreign policy. The Iran and I'm gonna cover this here very soon on one of my shows. The Iran foreign minister recently said that there's literally no difference between Biden and Trump. Now you have Biden continuing the super no holds bar approach against Iran. And remember when they was praying, they say, "Oh, we're gonna get back into Iran deal." Trump has been unhinged on Iran, and Trump was unhinged on Iran, which is why I never understood why anti-imperialists praised him. But when Biden and Blinken took over, they continued Trump's policy in Iran, and now he just recently met with Naftali Bennett, the new prime minister of Israel, who is even crazier than that Yahoo is. And during that meeting, once again, I'm gonna cover this on my show here very soon. During that meeting, he was essentially telling Biden, "Yo, we need a death by 1,000 cut strategy in Iran. We gotta do whatever we can to prevent them from getting nuclear." And you know what the Biden administration response to that was? They said, "We had great talks with Naftali Bennett, and we love the messaging and the communications between the United States and Israel right now." And Biden said he's 100% on board with that. Are you hearing the progressives that are praising, like the Kyle Kalinskis out here that are praising Biden? Are they talking about that? Are they bringing that up? Because this is the new direction the Biden administration is doing right now. They're shifting the focus to Afghanistan. They want to escalate tensions in Iran, and they are very open about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see this. I should have looked this up beforehand. I'm interested to see what was Trump's approval rating this time during his presidency compared to Biden's, because Biden hasn't made it through his first year yet.
I actually do need to look to see where Trump was. I know Trump always his numbers was always lagging, but to be underwater only 7 months in, that's devastating. And we've seen Joe Biden make the same exact mistake Donald Trump did. And a lot of people, they just want to blame COVID. They're like, "Oh, COVID-19 is responsible for why the politicians' numbers are struggling." And I actually float the opposite. People need to actually think instead of just being reactionary. If you actually think about it, COVID-19 brings a tremendous opportunity for the otherwise deeply unpopular politicians. Look at people like Andrew Cuomo, who at first, now he was forced into resignation because he was a scumbag, but his approval ratings were through the roof just because he was pretending to do the right thing. Now, imagine a scenario where COVID-19 hits and we have the ruling class that actually decides to give people healthcare. They use that as an excuse to give people healthcare. They extend unemployment benefits. And I remember Trump, he actually bumped up in the polls when he came out with Trump Bucks, the first payment. Remember? A lot of people did this, and Trump threw the entire election away. Because if Trump continued to do Trump Bucks like every month, hell, even every 2 months, his numbers would never drop. And there was people, even on Black Twitter, like, hell, Trump buns out. Hey, I don't care if Trump is mean. He's paying us. But then Trump stopped doing that. And then people like, "Oh, this dude, he don't care about us." Now imagine we have a president that was constantly actually doing the right thing, which we can afford, because we do the same thing to billionaires. We give them a ton of taxpayer money and corporate bailout money. So imagine we'd had that approach towards the working class. In that situation, no matter how bad things how bad things get, people were like, "Okay, at least Biden gave me a check. At least Trump gave me a check. At least they gave me health care. I had a family member, he got COVID, and his life was saved because he had government health care." And this is what I was flagging people before. I was laughing at the people who thought that neoliberal capitalism is the answer to the COVID-19 crisis, because there were studies that was already shown that if you had universal health care in America, it will actually save over 1/3 of COVID deaths. 1/3 of the COVID deaths would have been prevented if we had a national healthcare system. So that means if you are against Medicare for all and nationalized healthcare, it does not make a difference. And we've seen that with Biden. That's why things continue to get worse. That's why the idea that neoliberal capitalists will going to take over and handle this crisis is ridiculous, because that's the idea of thinking, "Oh, you just need a better manager." No, if you're a true leftist, you know it was systemic why we didn't handle COVID-19. Right, Sabby?
Exactly. I'm gonna shout out some of the super chats. Thanks so much, Franco.
Franco's in the house. Franco's in the house.
Thanks so much for the super chat, Franco. He said, after 40 years of listening to his corp donors, leftist pundits actually believe demented Biden all of a sudden stopped listening to them. Yeah, good point. And we have another one from Roger. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. Had an aha moment. people theorize as why MLK was assassinated. Beard started talking workers' rights, others Vietnam, but 2 months before death, he said reparations. That's a good point, Roger. I want to comment on um the idea about people thinking that, Joe Biden was going to be different than Trump. One of the things that I've said on here before is that if the current system remains the same, it doesn't really matter who you put in office. The system itself would have to change. That's why you have someone like Joe Biden come in and he said he was running on the soul of America. He's still doing the same things that Trump did. And Nick gave a good example of that with the prime minister situation in Israel. They got rid of one crazy nut job and then they got someone a lot worse. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Natalie Bennett is about as bad as it gets, because remember what they was calling Donald Trump, and whether you want to agree or disagree with that, that's beside the point. But they were like, Donald Trump is a white nationalist, and this is why Donald Trump is so dangerous. And whether you agree or disagree with that, fair enough. But what Benjamin Netanyahu and Natalie Bennett are, they are ethno-fascists, which is 100% worse than white nationalism. And that's without there's no doubt in that statement, because Natalie Bennett has multiple times called for the cleansing of the Palestinian people. Natalie Bennett, under Netanyahu's rule, which is why he actually rose to power, because he was the far right faction pushing Netanyahu to the right. The same, you know how like Joe Biden was pushing Ronald Reagan to the right in the 80s. That's like who Natalie Bennett is. And he was calling for the seizure of the West Bank. And even Netanyahu wasn't going that far. So Natalie Bennett right now is demanding more weapons, and that's what the Biden administration did. The Biden administration gave Israel more weapons deal, like Jamal Bowman. And I'm glad that Max Blumenthal mentioned this. You heard him say this earlier. How Jamal Bowman has been very loyal to the Israel lobby, the same way Elliot Engel was, the person he replaced. So it's like, what did we really accomplish? Because he actually voted. You guys think I'm being over dramatic? He voted for the Israel weapons deal during the Israel offensive into Palestine. That's unforgivable. Ilhan Omar joined him with that on that. So I'm glad that Max flagged that. But how can you call an administration that is working with Natalie Bennett and giving him weapons to siege and kill? And they're already bombing Gaza. They're killing kids in Palestine as we speak. And that's responsible. And that's on the hands of Joe Biden, on Jamal Bowman, the Israel lobby, and all their people who are sympathizers to them. So that's why I don't buy it. I don't buy the entire lesser two evils nonsense. So
me neither. Thanks so much, Roger, for the super chat. I knew a brother who voted for Bush too because he gave checks. That's a good point, Roger. And I want to bring up something about the stimulus checks too. Even when the first stimulus check they announced it was going out, and that was under Trump, I was still saying like that's not enough. And then they were like, we're going to send out a second stimulus check. And I was like, that's still not enough. And then Joe Biden was the one that promised people $2,000 checks, shorted people, gave them $1,400 checks. And I said, that's still not enough. And the reason why I say that is look at where we are now. All these people are about to be evicted. Those stimulus checks were not enough for those people to keep their homes, for those people to pay their rent. And that's why I said, like, they were giving people $1,200 stimulus check. I'm like, dude, where I live, $1,200 doesn't pay rent at all. So it really wasn't enough. I felt like they should have canceled rent for people. They knew, come on, because like anybody who's been behind, if you've ever been behind on your bills, or if you've ever been behind on rent, if you're behind on rent, unless somebody gives you money to pay it, it is really hard to get ahead on your rent. So how were all those people supposed to come up with the back rent plus the current rent that they now owe? Come on, like what were they thinking?
And this is what capitalists always do, where they always give the proletariat, they give the working class crumbs, and they give landlords everything. And it's funny how landlords, they always say stuff like this. They're deeply unserious, and they always fight the class war as well. But they said, well, even though we have this is their argument that they use in court and why they justify getting money and shutting down the moratorium. They say, hey, if you're a renter, you should have 12 months rent in advance. This is what the landlord said. They said, oh, it's not our fault that the economy crashed. We shouldn't be the ones suffer, because if you're a renter, you should have 12 months in advance. Now think about how ridiculous this is, because that's completely out of touch of the reality of the working class. But also, they're not following their rule. You realize that? So they think that being a landlord is a job. Being a landlord is not a job. Being a landlord is an investment you make. You make an investment in the property, so it's not a job, and you are not owed returns. This is what they don't understand. So remember how they say renters should have 12 months and back rent saved up? Isn't it hilarious how they don't take that logic into their own, where they say, oh, you should have 12 months or actually you should have like 2-3 years if you're an investor saved up so you don't go into the red. That is what a smart investor does. So you see all these stories that the corporate media is running, like, oh, this landlord is going homeless, this landlord is going bankrupt, because they're trying to gain sympathy to the ruling class, the oligarchs. But remember, if you go by their logic, shouldn't you have 12 months saved up just in case of an emergency? You see how their logic failed to work. But anyway, do not get twisted. This is why I want people to leave off with the eviction moratorium thing. The Democratic Party is deeply class loyal, and they work on behalf of their donors. And a lot of the Democratic Party, including Nancy Pelosi, they are landlords. So they know exactly what side they are on. But so if you're going to allow millions of people go homeless and you score a win for your landlords and for your community, because you're a landlord, you push it to the Supreme Court. You maneuver in a way to push it to the Supreme Court, despite the fact that you control Congress, you control the Senate, you control the White House, and the Supreme Court in June, despite them being extremely right-wing, this caught me off guard at the time. They said, yo, we actually going to side with you guys and extend the moratorium, but we do not agree that you should be able to do that to the CDC. So they was being nice. So you can attack the Supreme Court as an institution all you want, but in this particular case, they actually ruled to the left of what I expected. Because what I expected them, like, hell no, you can't do an eviction moratorium. Because we right-wing corporatists, they say, bro, I promise you, there are millions of people that are about to go homeless. So we don't want this to happen. If you want to say this, you got to go through Congress. So we're gonna extend it, even though we disagree with you guys. But so that's why I don't blame just the Supreme Court, which is a broken institution. Don't get me wrong, but this is not on them. This is on Congress. It's on Nancy Pelosi, because they knew in June they had to do something in Congress. But they kicked it to the Supreme Court, so they didn't take. Not only did they not take the political hit, they didn't try to score political points using Cory Bush in this protest, despite the fact that you guys are responsible for this happening in the first place. Isn't that hilarious?
No, I agree. My whole thing is, I'm going by what Neymar is saying here. Good luck trying to apply for a lease be approved when being evicted damages your credit score. And that's another thing. All these people that are going to be evicted, they're going to have evictions on their credit. So it's going to be harder for them to find another place to live.
That's going to be such a devastating crisis. Like, this is a society destabilizing event. And our ruling class, they are so greedy, they don't even care, because they know they will be fine. They can hire security forces. They can always relocate. But when you have millions of people going homeless, and now you have, and that's a great point. I didn't even really consider that point. And you have a lot of people that won't be able to get places later. That's a society destabilizing event. And a lot of people don't know how bad it's going to get if people allow this to happen. It's only to get worse. And you guys think it's going to stop here? It's not going to stop here. You're going to have millions of people go homeless when the moratorium, as it's happening right now. But then next year, you can have more people go in economic distress as capitalism continue to fail. So then you can have more people go homeless. Like, this is not going to stop. So what kind of precedent is this setting by not acting and doing everything you can to protect the homeless? But that's something that we always see in the Democratic Party institute. They have anti-homeless architectures in their blue states, in California, in New York. And people wonder why I don't see them as the champions of the working class.
No, I agree. I mean, it's just, if you think about cities like LA, where there's already, large tent communities, homeless people, just think about what it's going to be like next couple weeks, and unemployment's about to stop.
And this was the point I was making in the comments a little bit earlier. The ruling class knows exactly what's coming. And that's why you see them teaming up with Republicans in order to expand the police state. We have seen, and then now we got a lot of police that like protecting Whole Foods down where they have the hurricane at, and they are protecting property instead of delivering aid to the people. I don't have the number on top of my head. I retweeted, maybe I can find it to back my source up. But they were spending an unbelievable amount of money protecting property and having anti-looting forces. Instead of using that money to actually give aid to people, there are a lot of people who are stranded because of this storm. They're not doing that. They're protecting the property and the ruling class, and that's the institution that both parties agree unanimously to give more money to, because they know that millions of people are going to be homeless. They know that social order need to be upheld, and with the iron fist that we have not seen in a long time. We're at the point where we see homeless tents and encampments being broken up at gunpoint. Like we've seen police literally kick out a homeless encampment in California at gunpoint. I covered that on my show. So this is just the beginning. It's gonna get worse until we actually start having very serious conversations about actually opposing state violence, which you're not seeing nobody with like in none of the progressive politicians, none of the Justice Democrats, none of the big people that who got giant platforms. They're not taking this on. They're still playing the red-blue game. And that's not what this game is about anymore. It's about the ruling class versus the proletariat. It's the elite in the military and the police complex against the black and the brown and the indigenous communities. And where are the white allies going to fall in that fight? Are they going to continue to prop up politicians? Are they continue to donate to campaigns instead of mutual aid? Are they continue to prop up the police force and the police state? Are they going to stay silent on the unhinged expansion of the U.S. empire? Are they going to continue to vote for Democrats every 2 years? We already see who are deciding to fold and who deciding to fight. And Max Blumenthal, like you talked to earlier, he's one of the people that's fighting. He's one of the people actually calling out the ruling class. Frank Analysis, we saw him in the comment section a few times. He one of the people that actually standing up and fighting and demanding better of our politicians. So that's the split. And the people that want to take it easy, they don't want to focus on state violence too much, and the people that like us who say no, that's unacceptable.
Yeah. Speaking of politicians, by the way, and I'm mention Megan's comment here. I got a text message the other day from Bernie Sanders' campaign asking for money. I'm like, are you kidding me? Why are you asking for money again? Are you kidding? I'm not. No, I'm not giving more money. I want my money back. I want my money back. Megan says if the squad in Congress actually thought housing is a human right, they would have laughed at the pathetic offer of just $1,200 for the people versus fighting to cancel rent back in spring 2020.
Well said. And there's literally no reason. And I got them texts before. I got them texts as well from Justice Democrats or whatever, trying to get me to donate. And I'm like, you out of your goddamn mind. You know what they're doing right now? Bernie and them is holding town halls to pass Biden's agenda. And I know there may be some good things in the infrastructure deal, but doesn't that say a lot that Bernie is holding town hall for the Biden agenda, but he's not holding town hall for Medicare for all? Because the goal of the Justice Democrats is to pass the Biden agenda and to pass the agenda of Democrats and do not push them left. Despite what they said they were going to put Biden left, but nope, they're not going to make the Democrat Party uncomfortable. They're not going to demand Medicare for all. You can do the infrastructure rally in Indiana that what everyone was talking about and praising. I'm like, why are you not doing a rally for canceling rent? Why are you not doing a rally for defunding ICE, which Biden administration continue to prop up? You see how they are sheep herds of the Overton window. They're like, all right, at this point, the furthest we can go is center left, and I mean like center left, like not like I mean so center to the left that they're not even pushing a public option, which is trash. So that just shows you why you should never donate to these people again. Like that's the dumbest thing you can possibly do with your money right now. It's to donate to Justice Democrats or Bernie and these people, and they just want to pass Biden's agenda. Doesn't make any sense.
Take that money and donate it to mutual aid, and especially for all these people that are about to be evicted. And I'd feel bad, like honestly, if I was a candidate and I was running right now, I would feel bad asking people for money, considering everything that's going on. I would feel bad. I would just have to say, you know what, put that money towards to help the people that are about to be evicted.
There are relief aid funds for the Hurricane Ida. I've seen a lot of links been passed around in terms of how you can help people that was impacted by storm. Imagine asking for money for people instead of doing, like, why would you give money to a politician instead of relief efforts towards this hurricane? That's insane to me. That's insane that people would do that.
Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. Vote down ballot, start ballot initiatives, charter public banks, and support the United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives that help start up co-ops. 100% agree, Roger. Roger's really big on like worker co-ops, and he talks about them on here a lot. I think that's what we need to do. Like, we need to, it's like when Ryan Knight came on, he was explaining that like people criticize socialism so much, but and with socialism, you actually own the means of you own a piece of your labor, you own a piece of your work. We don't own anything right now. Anything I produce at my job, it's not really mine. It's not really mine. It's like, why do you think they have share drives? Everybody put all your information on the share drive, so when you leave, somebody else can just access what you created. I mean, it's just we don't really have we don't have that. And I would encourage everybody to go on Facebook. I saw a couple of groups, mutual aid groups set up for people in Louisiana for the hurricane. And I just thought to myself, like, here we go. I hope this is not Katrina again all over. I remember so many people were displaced. And yet, and they're still trying to evict people. And that's what really frustrates me. It's just, it's cold, it's callous. You would never see this happen in other countries I've lived in. You would never see this happen. Only in America.
I always talk about corporate propaganda, and the propaganda that I saw someone highlight. I want to dive into these numbers here shortly, but there's been a lot of coverage of the Hurricane Ida, and one thing that I found very interesting, how the corporate media was refusing to actually say like climate crisis. And I'm trying to see if I can find a tweet, but someone actually looked up how many segments they've done and how many times they actually mentioned the climate crisis, and they were just not bringing it up. And this is something that we have to drive home, that this is because we had the ruling class for the last few decades ignore this crisis. Now we're deeply in it, and we gotta start thinking about very carefully how we can spend our resources, because climate disasters like these are going to increase even more. So if we actually going to be smart about how we're going to spend our resources, we need to start thinking about how we're going to start protecting and donate to funds to support people who are going through these things, instead of wasting your money donating to a losing campaign like a lot of people did earlier this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, one thing I would recommend to people too, and I was guilty of this for a while, is like if you're moving, instead of like, because I used to like donate stuff to, I clean out, like do this thing where I clean out my closet once a year, and I would like, oh, okay, I'm gonna donate all these clothes to like Goodwill. Don't do that, because people still have to go to Goodwill and they have to buy it, they have to pay for it. So what I would do differently is now I would donate those clothes, like those items, to mutual aid groups. And there's a bunch of them on Facebook, because I've seen them and I've sent them to other people as well. There are people that need clothes. Some people need help with like paying their rent. Some people like, even in my neighborhood, there was a mutual aid request for people to pick up prescription medications for people. Some people, especially that are elderly, they live by themselves. Their family's not around to help them out. They can't really leave the house and get around like that. And they need people to pick up their medicine and stuff for them. So those groups are out there, but everybody, you can go to mutualaidhub.org and you can see all the mutual aid groups that are in your area. Highly recommend that you use that site.
The fact that we don't have like a structural society invested way to give people, like sick people, their medicine, sick people their groceries, kind of show how our system was broken, isn't it? I was laughing about this on my show last night, we was examining the Supreme Court reasoning behind not extending the eviction moratorium. Once again, the Supreme Court is a deeply broken institution designed to halt progress. That's why it doesn't make any sense why anyone would kick a giant decision like this to them. And the reason why I bring this up, because when they was talking about this, they said, "Oh, if we allow the CDC to extend the eviction moratorium, that would set a dangerous precedent. That mean they might be able to set a precedent where you can have free grocery deliveries for sick and people that are not able to leave home." And then when I said that, everyone was like, "Bro, that's actually a great idea. Why wouldn't you before that?" They said they will actually set a precedent where the CDC can say we got to institute high-speed internet in rural areas where people need to work at. That's a good idea. So you guys see the system designed not to actually implement real policy that would help people. Can you imagine we actually had a government that actually cared, that actually was able to give people high-speed internet in rural areas, that was able to deliver groceries, medicine for sick and elderly people? Like, that's actually good policy that we can easily pay for instead of getting corporations trillions of dollars, right?
Yep. Megan said, "Thanks so much for the super chat, Megan. I got the same text, Sab." I replied, "Please don't ask me for money for please don't ask me for money for no longer existing organization. Our revolution since changed. It's too pragmatic progressives. And why should I give money when Bernie stopped fighting before his debate with Biden last year?" Yeah, our revolution, like national our revolution is has changed. I don't understand what's happening with them. I did see the South Carolina, the local Our Revolution channel chapter challenge Clyburn though. And Clyburn was just ridiculous responding to them, of course. But yeah, after Biden won, it's interesting how many organizations and groups were just kind of like, okay, yay, Trump's out. Let's just roll with it.
Yeah, their goal is just to continue the Democratic Party agenda and only go as far left as the party is comfortable. The party have actually shifted them to the right instead of them shifting the party to the left. So these kind of things that we're talking about, there's literally no reason why AOC and Bernie Sanders couldn't use their giant email list to create mutual aid networks. And someone made good comments. I think it was Ramsey. That he left a great comment like, don't donate to charities, donate because charities are kind of scams. And I do want to back that up. And this is important as leftists to understand the difference between mutual aid and charity. So you got to be very careful because there are even some places that call themselves charities, but they may distribute their funds in a mutual aid way. So what I mean by this, what we do not want to do is donate to charities. Charities is by definition top up. Top down. So it's ran by philanthropists, by business owners, by corporations, and they use it mostly as tax write-offs, where a lot of the money is actually being spent in administration costs. So you're paying a lot of the salaries of people who run the charities, and that money actually don't go to the cause. But mutual aid is all about building horizontal structure of solidarity that actually has long-term effects that we can actually uphold people's lives. Instead of just having charity, they're not actually going to help. Mutual aid is all about building that infrastructure that we need to strike, that we can have so people actually can feed their kids. That is not what charity can do. So even when you look at organizations on what we can give money to, make sure it has a horizontal structure instead of a top-down structure. That's the important thing to keep in mind. So that's a great point. That's on the comments.
Yeah. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. If Dems are smart, they'd get Breyer off SCOTUS before 23. But they're not too smart, Roger. Like they're not too smart. But no, I agree with you, Nick, about charities, because I found out a couple years ago that even the Red Cross, I thought that was like a cool, legit charity, and finding out like how much money they keep for themselves. So
yeah. So that's why that's an important thing to. There's some places that are technically charities. But yeah, they're top up because it's only take care of the. Yeah, that's a good point, Leroy. They only take care of the top. And there's a few comments that pointed out how a lot of funds that they raise actually don't go towards a cause. So mutual aid is more than charity. I mean, I saw Ryan Grimm. He was talking to Franco. He was like, "Oh, you gotta just advocate for charity." And like that, you don't even know the difference. Like mutual aid is about building a solidarity network. Mm-hmm. So it actually is can be foundational. And you say, oh, this is not a way you can change society. Well, you're not going to change society through electoralism. So you might as well make sure people are taken care of in this late stage capitalist hellhole that we live in right now. That's what mutual aid is all about. That's why what Rome does with Tour for the Poor, that's what Infinity Mutual Aid, that's what Casey Tennis Mutual Aid is all about. Because Casey Tennis technically, like if you look at it, like, oh, it's charity, but no, it's actually mutual aid because they build a structure out of the way they actually supporting people. And that's the primary difference. So that's very important for them to understand.
Yeah, there's a lot of mutual aid groups here in Massachusetts, well, in Eastern Massachusetts. That's why I highly recommend people check out that website, Mutual Aid Hub, especially since we're going into winter, you guys, and some of these people about to be kicked out may need coats, boots, gloves, hats. It gets cold here. I know it probably gets really cold in Missouri too, right, Nick?
Yeah, our weather is all over the place. So it's really hot during the summer and get really cold in the winter. That's mostly just extreme weather. I don't remember it being like that growing up. Like we had like 4 seasons. Now it's like kind of like 2.5. So it's really hot, then like really cold, and then we have like we may have 2 months where it's warm, but other than that, extremely hot, extremely cold. And I don't remember it being like that. Like I remember we had like 3 different kind of. We had the summer, fall, winter, spring. Now it's like way more extreme. And that's what we're seeing in terms of the climate crisis getting worse. So that's kind of what we expect.
I agree. All right, guys, we're coming up on 8:30. It's about time for me to wrap up this thing. You know how I do. I got to get ready for the students tomorrow. But I do want to say this again for those of you. I see a lot of new people in the chat that FHL is on the road to 10K. And we've been using the hashtag FHL to 10K. Nick can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's our really ambitious goal. We have grown as far as we have only because of word of mouth, because it's not like the algorithm really helped us out. So we got a lot of great people that have been sharing. They like this. They like our show a friend and left it, so they share it to a friend. That's pretty much how we got to where we are right now. So that's why we started this initiative. So if anyone just share it to one friend, I'm pretty sure they don't even have to be leftists. I promise you, we can win a lot of liberals and a lot of conservatives over. So share it to your friends and help us spread our message. I have a show I'm doing with group Kareem Batesh and Peter Beatty. We dive more into what happened in Afghanistan, imperialism. We talk about Tulsi and her take, and how she actually kind of being a youthful idiot for pro-war propaganda. So we're gonna talk about that here. I think about an hour now. So, but we got great content every day. We got a lot of great guests coming through this week. So I'll announce that very soon. But otherwise, keep hitting the bell on Sabby Sabs show on Front and Leftists because we got a lot of great content. Sabby mentioned it earlier. We have a lot of plans for the future. So like we're more than just like a group podcast. We're a legitimate organization activists, and we want to help organize mutual aid. Like Rome about to be back on tour for the poor. Finney running mutual aid drives. We want to be out there in the street actually running stuff and showing people how politics should be done. Instead of just saying mutual aid, we want to be a part of that fight. So that's the future of FHL. So help us grow and see if we can hit that 10K mark here soon.
Yes, indeed. And Nick, don't you have a stream coming up tonight?
Yeah, I think we're gonna shoot for about an hour, 9:30 Eastern. Once again, Kareem, Batesh, and Peter Beatty gonna be on. We're gonna talk about that's usually our International Leftist Coalition panel. We can talk about some foreign policy. We're gonna talk about the media propaganda with Afghanistan and how they drum support towards war. And Tulsi Gabbard actually came out with a statement. I saw someone in the comment mention it, and that's very problematic. It's not an anti-imperialist take, and we're gonna break that down why we say that. So any politician can get it. I mean, I was on the Vanguard, and there was a lot of Tulsi fans out mad because we went after Tulsi, but I'll back the squad. I'll back Bernie. Any politician can get it. So Tulsi fans probably not gonna be happy tonight, but there's a lot to say about her recent take.
Awesome. And guys, as always, if you want to support the show, you can do so on patreon.com/Sabrina Salvati. If you want to support FHL, you can do so on Ko-fi. That's Ko-fi.com and scrolling across the bottom of the screen, FHL Network. And Nick, thanks so much for jumping on. This was cool. Nick is so fast.
I'm always down. If you saw me leaving comments, I was like, I can always down jump on stream. I just got to set up my computer. It's always fun. Like I said, I gotta get ready for my stream here in an hour. So I was like, this would be a great little warm up conversation before my stream. It's always fun to mix it up with Sabby. Great community that we have here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Nick. All right, guys, to the rest of you, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.